Well, hello, Peninsula Student Ministries. We're now in the month of May in our Gospel Project lessons. And this week, we're going to be looking at a lesson called Jesus Calling His Disciples. This is session 4 of Unit 20, if you're following along with the PDFs online, which we hope that you are. Our text this week is going to come from Luke chapter 5. And in verses 3 through 11, Jesus is going to call some fishermen to follow him. Simon Peter, James, and John, the sons of Zebedee, are going to be men that he's going to say, hey, you guys come follow me. And then in verses 27 through 32 of this same chapter, Luke 5, Jesus is going to call Levi, a tax collector, to follow him. And we can learn a lot about Jesus simply by the type of men that he calls to follow him. For example, the jobs that these men had reveal to us what type of person Jesus is after. He first chooses common fishermen to follow him. And fishing during this time was not a profession that many people would have aspired to. This isn't a profession that young Israelite children would have dreamed about being when they grew up. Many people would have looked at fishermen during this time and thought that these are the type of men that didn't quite make the cut. Then he calls a tax collector to follow him. Tax collectors during this time were some of the most despised people in ancient Israel. At this time, Rome is occupying Israel, and the tax collector's job was to collect taxes from their own people to give to Rome, which was an enemy of Israel. And so they're collecting taxes from their people to give to an enemy of their people. And almost all of the tax collectors would take more than they were actually required to take so that they could put some in their own pockets before they turned it over to Rome. And so these are people that are not the top of the society. But Jesus, these are the people that Jesus is after. These are the people that Jesus goes after, and he says, follow me. And we can see explicitly what type of men Jesus is calling by how they are described in these verses. In verse 8 of Luke 5, Peter calls himself a sinner. And in verse 27 through 32, when Jesus is dining with Levi, the Pharisees accuse Jesus of eating and drinking with sinners. And I love Jesus' response to this accusation. He says in verse 32 that he hasn't come to call the righteous, but he has come to call sinners. And it's not only that Jesus calls sinners like you and I to be his followers, he then calls us sinners to call fellow sinners to follow Jesus as we follow Jesus. And we can see this when Jesus tells Peter in verse 10 that he is going to make him fishers of men. And we see it more explicitly commanded in Matthew 28 in the Great Commission. Jesus has commanded that we preach the gospel to all nations, and that includes our own nation. It's the duty of everyone who considers or calls themselves a follower of Christ to seek to share the gospel with those around them. And we need to do this verbally while also doing it through our lifestyle. And so this week, I want you to consider what are the things that you wrestle with, or what are the hurdles or the challenges that you face when it comes to sharing your faith with others. And then I would love for you to join us on our Zoom Bible study meeting Mondays at 1 o'clock so that we can dive into this text in Luke 5 and start to dissect it more together and talk about tips for us sharing our faith with those around us in ways that we can be encouraged to share the good news of Jesus. Just like Simon did, just like James did, just like John and Levi. Have a great week, PSM.